So, welcome back to part 2 of our little video series. Now we will take everything that we just learned in part 1 and use it for a real-world example. So we will go and look at an actual studio that went from stereo to Dolby Atmos and see how that goes. So, this is the studio. This was how it looked in the beginning. It's a stereo room, and you can see the typical thing. The mix position is very close to the left and right speakers. So that is something to look into. How can you get this into a Dolby Atmos workflow? This is the Oslo Studios in Basel, Switzerland. They do Dolby Atmos music, post-production, commercials. Just for your info in case you're interested. Thank you, of course, Oslo Studios, that we can use your room as an example. So this is basically the room drawing from that studio. You can see mix position, mixing desk, left and right speakers. So this is what we had in the beginning. And now, of course, we should go into DART and enter the room dimensions. Activate macros. Agree to our terms and conditions. Let's say we use default mode and we enter the room dimensions as we just saw them. So it's 6.2 meters long and 5.8 meters wide. And 5.8. And the height is, I can tell you, it's 2 meters and 70 high. So second step is to pause for a quick moment and double check, is this room big enough? Obviously, in this case, it is. I mean, let's assume you put your sides around here and here. The room is 5 meters 80. That means you will still have more than 5 meters between your surrounds. So that's very big. And obviously the same goes from front to rear. So that's an easy answer. 2 meters and 70 is of course also a nice height of the working space. So all is fine. So we can jump to the next question, which is the question of mix position. So let's ask yourself again, do you want to keep sitting here, or do you really want to keep your left and right where they are when you make the transition to Dolby Atmos? In this case, we basically redesigned the room. So the existing mix position was not set in stone, which is very helpful. So what we did was we pulled the mix position slightly back, which also helped because then you are no longer in the exact middle of the room. So here you are almost exactly in the middle of the room, which is not ideal for acoustic reasons. So pulling it slightly back and pull left and right slightly to the front. So this is where we actually ended up. So you see, pulled the mix position a little bit back and pulled left, center, right a little bit forward. And now you can already see that you're sitting kind of in the middle of a potential speaker layout. You can see that with this little circle. And at the same time, you're not sitting in the exact middle of the room. So that looked reasonable for us. So this is what we ended up. So this is a decision that you have to make. There are no rules about this. You have to make this this decision individually for every studio. Just make sure that you end up being, as I mentioned, between 30% and 70% of the distance between center and back surround. Okay, which of course in this case we absolutely are. So this is the center, and spoiler alert, the back surrounds will most likely be here. So that means you're sitting nicely in the middle between back surrounds and center. Okay, so let's go and edit this position 3.5 into the DART. And as soon as we do that, DART will automatically populate all of that for us and draw a room. And now you can already see the DART is assuming left, center, right to be straight at the wall. But in this room, you see left, center, right are not at the wall, because if you would pull them all the way back, they would be quite far away. Can be a problem in terms of headroom. And also the studio used a small, not a small, but not a giant screen here. So that's the screen. And pulling left and right all the way out, it would be quite far outside of the screen. So ultimately we just pulled them here. So in that case, DART cannot know that, right? So we have to manually enter that value. So you see here, the center is 1 meter away from the front wall. So we go here and we change this value to be 1 meter. And the left and right are, you see, like positioned in a circle. So this is 1.37 meters. And now you can already see that the room looks a bit more like it in DART. And there's one little thing. Now DART changed the angle because we changed the position, and that also changes the angle. We want to change the angle back. Now you can either take a tape measure and measure that distance from the center line to the left speaker. So you basically go and you measure this distance from the center line to the speaker, and you change that. The alternative is you can click, switch to angle entry, change that angle to 30 because that's the angle you want. And now you see DART will change this value to automatically bring the speakers so far together that the angle will be 30 degrees. So, and you can now see that in the corresponding room drawing, it now looks perfect. Okay, so now we have defined our mix position and our left, center, right. Now it's time to define the surrounds. So we're adding, this room doesn't have a 914, it's a 714 configuration. So we have side surrounds and back surrounds. And you can see DART automatically place them against the wall. Okay, so you see the room is 5 meters and 80 wide. We are sitting in the middle, so we're measuring the distance from the center line. So that's half of the room. So that means here 2 meters and 60 is basically, you see, all the way to the side wall. And now if you look at the actual room, the speaker is not placed straight against the wall. There's a little bit of distance here. Why is that distance? I can show you in the photo. You see here are acoustic absorbers. So that's why the speakers are not placed straight against the wall. Again, DART cannot know that, so we have to tell him and we have to just change that. So you click to XYZ entry and you change that value. Let's take our tape measure and we measure the distance from the center line to the speaker. That's 2 meters and 44. You can do this, you can measure this in your actual room, or you can of course create a drawing in AutoCAD or in Visio or SketchUp and make that measurement virtually, like we do that right now. Or you can do it the other way around and do the values in DART and then take that value and apply them to the real world space. So, okay, so it works both ways, right? Take the real world thing, edit them into DART, or take the advice from DART and apply that to the real world. Okay, 2 meters and 44. So here we go. And we change that value. And so we effectively just took the speaker and moved it 16 centimeters away from the wall. Bring it closer to the center line. And you can see now the drawing is reflecting that. And now let's see what's the distance from the front to the side surround, that's 3 meters 92. So we're adding that. Okay, and here we have our position of the side surround, and you can see it's 100 degrees, so that's perfect. Let's have a look at the rear surrounds. So the rear surrounds, you can see they are in line with the side surrounds, which makes a lot of sense. In many cases, the speakers should be in line, but it's not a strict requirement. You can also move them slightly in. In this case, they are in line, so we also move this to be 2 meters and 44. And then again, the speaker is slightly not straight against the wall, but slightly forward. So again, we measure that distance. So that's maybe 5 meters and 80. So here we are at 133 degrees. And that's also what we measured in the real world. So here we go. Okay, so now you can see that this drawing matches this drawing. Of course, now it's also important to have one look from the side. So here you see, here is now the side view. So here's our door. Here is the mixing desk, mix position. And you can see very simple, the front, the side surround, and the rear surround, they all are at ear height, which in that case is 0 degrees. So it's the same height, right? And you can see that here, that's the Z value. That's 120, that's ear height. You can, of course, change that. For example, it might be necessary that your side surrounds are slightly higher. In that case, you just enter it here in DARDT, and you will see DARDT will still allow you to do that. It will not turn red or anything. So for example, now it's 1.50 meters. You see here. And what happens is if you move these higher, you should also make the overheads steeper so that you still have enough space between your side surrounds and your overheads. So that's why you have to edit this here and basically make this angle steeper, for example, 48 or 50. So you see, as soon as the cell becomes white again, you know that you're now in the right range. So very fun and interactive. So this way, and you can also see now that the drawing is reflecting the fact that your sides and your rears are higher. Okay, so this is what you need to do if you want to have speakers higher than ear height for any reason. Typical reasons might be client seating. So you might have your couch, your client couch, and you don't want to have the back surrounds right behind it. So you might need to raise them a little bit. And that's, of course, possible to do that in Dolby Atmos. All right, so that's the sides. And now we go and enter the overhead speakers. So you can see DARDT automatically creates them at 45 degrees, auto-populates them to 45 degrees, and then you can just read the values here. So the front overheads are 2 meters and 30 from the front wall. The rear overheads are 4 meters and 70 from the front wall. Let's have a look at the actual design in the final room. That's how it looks. So here you see the left, center, right, and the side surrounds are the same as before, but now we added 4 overhead speakers as before. And you can see we ended up at very similar levels as the ones that DARDT just suggested. So it's slightly closer to each other. So you see the distance is, in that case, a little bit closer. So this was 2 meters 42. Yeah, and on the rear, it's also a little bit closer. So like 4 meters 58 or something. And on from the center axis, we are 1 meter and 6 centimeters and not 1 meter 20. So this is where we had the speakers, and you can see The resulting angle is 48 and 49 degrees. Okay, so that's still inside the range. You can see the fields are all fine, nothing is red. And you can see in the drawing that this looks very reasonable, and you are free to do the room, to design the room exactly like that. And this is how it looks in the top view. And now if you scroll down, this is how it looks from the side. So you see we ended up with 48.5 degrees. And a nice rectangular square on top of the mix position. This is the rear view, looking from the rear, left, center, right, side surrounds, and the tops. So, and this is how the actual room ended up. You can see, this is the mixing console. Here we see left, center, right are pushed forward, closer to the walls. Here we have the side surrounds placed flush against the absorber. Rear surrounds slightly brought forward, and the ceiling speakers placed nicely 1, 2, 3, 4 in a grid, and you can already see that the grid is perfectly centered around the sweet spot, which is here slightly behind the mixing console. So again, it's important to define the sweet spot properly, because now let's imagine you would move your console, then all the speakers would be in the wrong positions. So really, once you start positioning your speakers, your sweet spot needs to be defined. This is how it looks from the other side. Yeah. Okay, now just for fun, let's also fill in the DART in terms of loudspeakers. So you could see these were Genelec S360. Here you go. So these speakers have a lot of headroom because it's quite big speakers, and we are not that far away from them, so very powerful. For the surrounds, these are the the 8341s. And you see you have plenty of headroom, but I think we even used them with bass management, so we can use the Genelec 8341A 80 Hertz BM. BM is for bass management. So this one. You see, now we have even more headroom. So that means you could even run the room at 85 if you want. So only one field is yellow, and yellow is still pretty nice. So quick thing about the color coding. Green means that you have more than 3 dB above the required headroom. So actually not just plus 20, but even plus 23. Yellow means you just barely make it. You are between 0 and 3. And orange means you are below 0, and red means you are more than 3 dB below the target. So again, if I would switch here to, I don't know, 80/20s, it would be red. So typically you don't want 80/20s as your mains. You see that's minus 17 dB, so that's probably not gonna be a nice sounding setup then. Okay. Also probably a nice little tool is you have the delay settings here. So it will show you actually how much the speakers will need to be delayed, will be a good starting point. Yeah. But of course you should actually also go and calibrate the delays and measure it really with, for example, an impulse response, and make sure to really set this, not just because this is only taking into account the physical distance, but not anything else that might happen in the room, like converters and whatever DSPs. All right, but basically that is step by step. You see, it's not, doesn't take an insane amount of time. If you follow these steps closely, it can help you to get to a nice, well-designed Dolby Atmos mix room. Yeah, let's add the subwoofer. So Genelec 7380 we had here. So you can see that's actually, so we should go back down to 79. So quite often the subwoofer is the one that requires the most headroom. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I think this really helps you to get into a nice setup. And I would say if you have any questions, write us through the onboarding form or post in our forum, or reach out to our certified service partners. This is really the resources we have available for you. Thank you very much.